One of the most common comments that I've been hearing frequently as people are starting to think about their New Year's resolutions is, I need to cut carbs. I need to take carbs out of my diet. I eat too many carbs. And it really got me start to think about why the perception of carbs are such a negative thing. But before passing any kind of judgment, I started to think a little bit about my journey and some of the things that I used to think about. And in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that I used to train and how that has evolved over the last 5 years as I've transitioned to this hybrid athlete training, but also matured as a personal trainer. I recently posted on my social media a fitness journey showing not just an old picture of when I used to be a bigger guy, but what I looked like when I first became a trainer and what I look like today. One of the things I'm always open about is that I don't know all the answers. I'm always looking for ways to optimize the body, programming, and nutrition. And as studies continue to come out, and as we continue to go through trial and error, and as we continue to evolve and research, I do my best to share not just my knowledge of what I hear from other trainers, but also highlight some of the lessons that I've learned over the last 5 years. And at the end of the video, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can apply different frameworks based on your goals when it comes to protein and carbs. But let's go back to that Instagram post. So it was 4 pictures. There was one where I was a bigger guy. I was about 25 years old. One in 2018 when I got my group fitness instructor certification. One in 2019 when I got my personal trainer certification. And then one here from 2023, just a few weeks ago before the recording of this video. But I want to first focus on the picture with the white background. This is the one from 2019. This was 1 year into being a trainer. And so let's talk a little bit about how I used to train, eat, and how I prep for that photo shoot. So from a training standpoint, I would do all high intensity running. It was high heart rate. Let's see how many calories we could burn. And sometimes I would hit that high heart rate 2 times a day if I was teaching a group fitness class that night. From a strength training perspective, I'd be doing lightweight but high reps. So it would be like 4 sets of 15 to 20 reps per exercise. And then from a nutrition standpoint, I was in a low carb diet where I was taking anywhere between 100 to 150 grams of carbs on a daily basis. And thinking back to those early years, I recognized the insufficient fuel that I was putting in my body and how hard I was making it work. The conditioning was at a high heart rate and just begging for glucose for fuel, but because I was on a low carb diet, I was forcing the body to burn fat when it ran out of carbs. Now you might be thinking to yourself hearing that, well, that's a good thing, right? Not always. One of the things that I noticed over time is that my hormones and testosterone started to suffer, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And while I was only lifting lighter weight, I wasn't really asking too much from a carb perspective there, but I wasn't growing as an athlete. And that's where you see a big difference in the picture with the white background versus the 2023 photo. And the last thing that I'll mention about this photo is that I took 2 weeks to prep for that picture. I went on a completely zero carb diet, and then the week of the photo shoot, I went through this whole water and sodium thing. I looked up a way of how to get ready for a photo shoot for bodybuilders, and that was the outcome of that photo. I can honestly say that I walked into that day completely lightheaded, but I thought that was what you needed to do. So enough about the 2019 photo. Let's talk a little bit about the November photo. We'll do the same thing. Let's talk a little bit about like the training, the nutrition, and the prep for that photo. So from a training perspective, I still do the conditioning and the strength training, but a little bit different. From a conditioning standpoint, most of my conditioning is running, and I do 80% of that running at zone 2, which is that slow running that I always talk about on my social media. 80% slow, 20% high. So a drastic change from what I was doing back in 2019. From a strength perspective, I pivoted my volume to 4 to 5 sets of 8 to 10 reps so I could actually develop true strength. This is one of the things that I learned in transitioning from just being a trainer to an actual athlete. And I learned this the hard way when I did my first Spartan race and realized that I didn't really have true strength. I was fit, but I wasn't healthy. And then from a nutrition standpoint, my carbs are over double now than what it was in 2019. Today, I take anywhere between 300 to 350 grams on a daily basis. And the only prep that I did for the photo I took in November was really just ensuring that I had carbs in my system and a ton of water. And I took the photo right after a workout. So there was no prep leading up to that day. It was just how I looked after I worked out, ensuring that I was fully hydrated, that I had fuel in my system, and that I felt great versus completely lightheaded in the last one. And this leads to one of the biggest lessons that I've learned over the last 5 years, which is to have a focus on training for performance versus aesthetics. One of the things that I learned is that if you train for performance, one of the indirect outcomes is aesthetics. But just because you train for aesthetics does not mean that you're going to be able to perform well. And again, it goes to that concept of being healthy over fit. And a lot of it came down to the type of training that I was doing, where my conditioning slowed down dramatically, where I was spending 80% of my time in that very low heart rate for a very long time, and only 20% of my volume is at that high intensity rate. One of the reasons reasons why I love this type of training is, one, it doesn't put a lot of strain on the body, but two, it leverages fat as a fuel, and you save your glucose levels for those high intensity days or your strength training days. By changing my strength training from a 4x20 to a 4x10, I started to develop true muscle, which then helped out my metabolism and regulated my hormones. I did a video testing my testosterone about how it was so bad, and that was at the time where I was transitioning into this hybrid athlete style training and realizing that I needed true strength in order to compete well in the races that I was participating in. And I've been trying to think of like a good analogy to use here, but when you have more muscle on your body, you burn more calories in your resting metabolic rate. So your resting metabolic rate is also known as your basal metabolic rate, and that number is essentially how many calories do you burn if you were to sit in a chair for 24 hours. If you have more muscle on your body, that's just going to burn more calories naturally, versus if you did a lot of conditioning, a lot of running, but no strength training, you're going to need to do more conditioning to burn off the calories that you have in your system, versus if you have muscle, the muscle is going to be burning that calories on its own. Think of it like two types of cars. Think of like a V12 Lamborghini car sitting at idle versus a Honda Civic 4-cylinder. If you put the same amount of gas in both cars at the same time, that Lamborghini is going to burn through the gasoline a lot faster than the Honda will, because it's just a bigger, powerful motor. Now, some of the feedback that I've heard is that some people don't want to be putting on muscle. Some females fear getting bulky and they don't want to get that bulky look, and I totally understand that. One thing I can tell you is that building muscle is really hard, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Bodybuilders train specifically to build muscle over years and years, and if you're coupling strength training with conditioning, you'll find yourself where it's a nice balance of having muscle but being toned plus athletic together. So I made that comment of pivoting the focus to performance versus aesthetics. So if we want to perform well, we need the right type of fuel. So there's two types of energy systems in the body. There's your aerobic system and your anaerobic system. Let's break them down. Aerobic system is like your low level intensity. I mentioned zone 2 conditioning earlier. That's that low heart rate. That's also like stuff like moving around the house, walking, easy bike rides. The aerobic system burns fat, and we have an endless supply in our body to burn fat. The second system is called your anaerobic system. Think of this as like your high heart rate stuff. Fast sprints, running up a hill for some power workouts, strength training. The anaerobic system relies on glucose to fuel properly. And one of the things that I always like to emphasize is that with glucose, the body can only hold so much glucose at a given time. That's why you see marathon runners taking in goos as they're running, because they're consistently trying to keep their glucose levels high because they're running at such a high heart rate. Now, what happens if you run out of glucose? This is something where, like, if you're running too hot for too long and you're not properly trained for that specific event, you'll go through what's called a bonk. Some people call it hitting the wall, where you just stop performing and you have to take some time to just completely stop and let the body fully recover before you can get going again. So why do I mention this? I mention this because we do want to have workouts where we're hitting that anaerobic system. In the conditioning world, this could be our high heart rate stuff, sprints and hills. And in our strength training, this could be our heavy lifts. This is where we start to develop the muscle. In last week's video, we talked about how conditioning increases our longevity, so our lifespan, and strength training increases our quality of life, so ensuring that we're able to be functional in day-to-day activity. And if we want to perform well in both aspects, we need the correct fuel, which is glucose, carbs, and sugar, to perform at the right levels. So then the next question becomes, well, how much carbs should I be eating? And that is definitely an answer that is different for everybody. One of the things that I do as a hybrid athlete is I just take my body weight and I multiply that by 2.5, and those are the amount of grams that I want to be taking in on a daily basis. I use that number to help me get through 7 to 10 mile runs in the morning, 90-minute strength training sessions in the evening. If you're looking for ways to test out what may work for you, you could use either 2.5 or you can just do times 2. So you take your body weight. So if you're 150 pounds, you could just say, I want to do 300 grams of carbs on a daily basis, and see where you're at after 2 weeks. Do you feel good? Do you feel fatigued? This is something that I think about all the time, which is it is a journey. And that's why I posted that photo on my social media, because I did want to show that it wasn't something that happened overnight. It's taken me 5 years to get to the place where I'm at today. And I feel like I'm just starting to get to a place where I'm really feeling optimized. And this is someone who got 2 different certifications in the fitness world. So don't feel bad if you don't know the answers today. This is something that's ongoing. It's a journey, and allow yourself to make the mistakes, because I 100% have done them too. My hope is that through these types of videos, I can showcase some of the lessons that I've I've learned over the last few years to help get you answers quicker. And if you want more in-depth information, in the Hybrid Method app, there is a nutrition e-guide where I essentially provide my entire framework of how I calculate my calories and my macros and how I space out my meals throughout the day. At 35 years old, I feel much more alive than I was when I was 25, and I feel like I can compete for the next 3 to 5 years in hybrid racing. So again, I hope this video really helps just clear the air around the perception of carbs, that they are good for you and they are needed, but there is a good way to measure out like what do you need for you. Again, it could be your body weight times 1.5, your body weight times 2, or your body weight times 2.5. Play with the numbers because everybody's body is different, and I would recommend stick with the plan for 2 weeks, see how it feels, and just make minor adjustments from there. One of the most common pitfalls that I see people go through is they try to go too hard too soon, which would lead to a bonk, and then they ultimately end up binging. So take the small step. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments section below. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you in the next video.